So Joe Rogan just said something that broke the internet again. But this time, it's not about politics, aliens, or cancel culture. It's about Charlie Kirk's widow. One cryptic sentence, one tiny moment, and suddenly millions are asking the same question. Was there more to this story than anyone's admitting? Buckle up, because what started as a podcast rant just turned into one of the most viral mysteries of the year. And we're about to unpack every shocking twist behind Joe Rogan's comment on Charlie Kirk's widow's secret relationship. The comment that shook the internet. It started like any other Joe Rogan episode. Casual, unfiltered, and unpredictable. One moment they were cracking jokes about UFOs. The next he dropped a sentence that froze the room. This story about Charlie Kirk's death doesn't make sense. That was it. No warning, no build-up, just that quiet, measured tone Rogan uses right before the world loses its mind. Within minutes, Reddit threads lit up, YouTube clips multiplied like wildfire, and X, formerly Twitter, turned into a digital crime scene. People were zooming in, slowing down, and decoding every syllable, convinced Rogan wasn't just thinking out loud, he was exposing something big. And if there's one thing everyone knows about Joe Rogan, it's this. He doesn't toss words casually. Every pause feels like a breadcrumb. Every laugh hides a hint. So when he questioned the official story behind Charlie Kirk's widow, fans could feel it. That quiet tremor that comes right before the internet implodes. Something's not adding up, Rogan muttered almost under his breath, but that's all it took. People replayed that clip frame by frame, listening for subtext. Was he just speculating, or did he know something? His co-host shifted uncomfortably. The air got heavier, and for a split second, even Rogan seemed to realize he'd just stepped into a story that was much bigger than him. Within hours, hashtags like #JoeRogan, #Charlie Kirk a widow, and #Hidden Truth dominated the algorithm. Comment sections exploded with theories ranging from secret relationships to political cover-ups. The audience didn't hear doubt, they heard a revelation, and that's the power of Rogan's voice. He doesn't scream conspiracy, he whispers it, and somehow it echoes louder than breaking news. But if that single remark could shake the internet, what came next? When people started digging into Erica Kirk's past, would split it in half. The skeptic's instinct. Joe Rogan has built an empire on doubt. Not anger, not outrage, but that raised eyebrow that makes millions of people rethink what they thought they knew. So when he looked straight into the camera and said, "Something's off about this story," people felt it in their gut. This wasn't conspiracy theorist Rogan. This was investigator Rogan, the one who notices things no one else does. He questioned how the Charlie Kirk tragedy wrapped up so quickly, how every detail felt polished, like a Netflix script about politics and loss. The motive was crystal clear, the suspect was caught, and the timeline, too perfect. Rogan smirked and said what everyone else was thinking. That's convenient, a little too convenient. And just like that, the seed of skepticism was planted. The more he spoke, the clearer it became. Rogan wasn't buying it. He pointed out the bizarre pace of the investigation, the oddly tidy statements, and the strange silence from the people closest to Kirk. It all felt manufactured. He leaned back, laughed lightly, and said, "They expect us to believe this guy carried a World War I rifle onto a rooftop, fired it, and then vanished for hours? Yeah, okay." That one sarcastic chuckle did more damage than any headline could. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, collected, almost amused. The kind of disbelief that spreads faster than facts ever could. And when Rogan questions something, it doesn't just stay in the studio. It leaks into millions of minds. Clips flooded TikTok, fans quoted him word for word, and suddenly skepticism was the new truth. People didn't know what happened to Charlie Kirk, but they knew they didn't believe what they'd been told. And that's when the focus shifted, from what happened to who benefited. Because in every mystery, Rogan reminds us of one thing: follow the power, not the pain. The widow in the crosshairs. It didn't take long for the internet to find its next obsession. Erica Kirk, the grieving widow, turned overnight headline. One moment, she was wiping tears at her husband's memorial. The next, her face was everywhere. Thumbnails, reaction clips, conspiracy threads, and side-by-side comparisons with every public appearance she'd ever made. When Joe Rogan hinted that something about this story doesn't sit right, the world didn't just listen, it zoomed in. People slowed her interviews to half speed, dissecting her tone, her body language, her smile. Some said she looked heartbroken, others swore she looked rehearsed. She blinked too little. She smiled too much. That's not grief, that's guilt. One viral comment read, "Within hours, Erica Kirk was trending. Her photos, once snapshots of faith, family, and conservative pride, were being analyzed like crime scene evidence. Screenshots of her speech, slowed down clips of her holding Charlie's framed portrait, all became became proof of something deeper. The internet didn't care about context anymore. It wanted a villain, and the fact that Erica stayed calm, poised, and silent, that only made her more suspicious. People began asking impossible questions. How did she become CEO of Turning Point USA so fast? Why did Donald Trump speak at the funeral? Why did she look directly at him during that moment? And the biggest ones, who really benefits from Charlie Kirk's absence? Every theory circled back to the same name. Every thread, every thumbnail, every podcast twist led to her. But Erica didn't flinch. No statements, no interviews, no explanations. Just the same polished posts. Bible verses, faith, light, resilience. The silence that was supposed to calm the chaos, it made it worse. Because in the age of social media, silence doesn't mean peace. It means strategy. And that's when people stopped seeing Erica as a widow and started seeing her as a player, a new face in a very old game of power, politics, and perception. But what most people didn't realize is that Erica's story didn't start with Charlie Kirk. It started long before him, and once people uncovered her past, everything about this mystery changed. The pageant passed. Before she was Erica Kirk, the poised widow standing beside a podium draped in flags, she was Erica France, the girl with the crown, the camera-ready smile, and the dream of becoming America's next sweetheart. Long before Turning Point USA, long before the headlines and speculation, she was walking across a stage owned by a man who would later shape her fate, Donald J. Trump. Back in 2012, Erica wasn't giving speeches about politics. She was competing for the title of Miss USA under Trump's Miss Universe organization. The same Trump who, even then, was famous for his hands-on involvement, attending rehearsals, mingling backstage, and personally approving contestants for television segments. He remembered names, faces, and, according to former contestants, never forgot a pretty smile. When people rediscovered that connection, the internet went nuclear. Suddenly, clips from that year's pageant resurfaced online. Fans paused grainy footage, zoomed in on contestant hash 23, Miss Arizona, Erica France, and whispered, "That's her." The music, the lights, the confident spin. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was revelation. Because now, everything looked different. Trump's embrace at the memorial, his whisper into her ear, the way he held her hand for a moment too long. It all had context. What once seemed like comfort now looked like history repeating itself. And then came the theories, the wild, viral kind that only social media can birth. Did Trump already know Erica before Charlie? Was their bond political or personal? Did that connection quietly follow her into the conservative world? The questions multiplied faster than anyone could answer them. Journalists dug up photos, old event guest lists, charity dinners, and social media posts from the early 2010s. Every new image of Erica standing somewhere near Trump became a breadcrumb in a digital manhunt for the truth. But here's where it got even more cinematic. Erica didn't deny any of it. She didn't clarify, correct, or even comment. Her silence wasn't defensive, it was calculated. It turned her into a mystery, a myth, a mirror for whatever story the public wanted to believe. And Joe Rogan, the man who started this avalanche, didn't need to say another word. His followers did it for him, filling in the blanks one theory at a time. Because in the modern world, when fame meets politics and grief meets power, the truth doesn't matter. The optics do. And that's when the story took a turn. From the glamorous glow of the pageant stage to the cold, blinding light of the memorial cameras. Because what happened next, that whisper would change everything. The rise that raised eyebrows. If there's one thing the internet can't resist, it's a transformation story. And Erica Kirk's rise wasn't just fast, it was blinding. One week, she was standing in front of cameras draped in black, eyes heavy with loss. The next, she was on stage, confident, composed, and crowned as the new CEO of Turning Point USA, the very empire her husband built from scratch. The announcement hit like a thunderclap. Even Rogan's fans, usually cynical but curious, stopped scrolling and asked the same thing. Wait, already? It wasn't just the speed, it was the precision. The press release was polished. The board's unanimous vote came out of nowhere. Her first public photo as CEO was perfectly lit. Posture straight, jaw set, eyes calm. To some, it looked like grace under fire. To others, it looked like the next act of a script written long before Charlie Kirk's death. Online forums called it the fastest promotion in political history. Meme pages joked that she'd skipped the 5 stages of grief and gone straight to corporate restructuring. But behind the mockery was unease. People weren't laughing because it was funny. They were laughing because it felt off. And then came the headlines, "Widow takes the helm. Legacy lives on through Erica Erica Kirk. Turning Point USA enters a new era. It all sounded noble, but the timing didn't match the tragedy. The paint wasn't even dry on the memorial banners before the leadership ceremony began. Even those closest to the movement whispered that the transition seemed too smooth. Rogan didn't name names, but his tone shifted when he spoke about it. He said, "It's weird how everything just fell into place, like someone already knew what to do before it even happened." And that's what made people start digging deeper. Who made the decision? When was it made? And why did Donald Trump publicly endorse her leadership just days after the announcement? Because when Trump speaks, it's never random. And his words about Erica, calling her a warrior and the future of the movement, didn't sound like condolences. They sounded like a coronation. Suddenly, the narrative wasn't about survival. It was about succession. Erica wasn't just stepping into Charlie's shoes. She was stepping into his power. And the internet noticed. The memes stopped being jokes. The whispers turned into threads. And the woman once known for her quiet grace had become something else entirely. A symbol, a mystery, and possibly a mastermind. But if people thought her rise to power was suspicious, what happened next? One intimate moment caught on camera would ignite a firestorm that made even Rogan's jaw drop. The whisper at the memorial. The air inside the stadium was heavy, not just with grief, but with spectacle. Cameras lined every aisle, and the stage glowed like a political altar. Former President Donald Trump had just finished his eulogy. Strong voice, slow delivery, just the right balance between sorrow and strength. The crowd rose in silence. The music faded, and that's when it happened. Trump stepped down from the podium, walked straight toward Erica Kirk, and pulled her into an embrace that lasted a little too long. The moment stretched 10 seconds, 15 maybe, long enough for 1,000 lenses to lock in. And then came the whisper. No one could hear the words, but everyone felt the impact. Trump leaned close, his hand gripping her shoulder. His head tilted slightly as he spoke into her ear. Erica froze. Her eyes glistened, her breath hitched, and then she smiled. A small, fragile smile that shouldn't have meant anything, but did. The crowd applauded, unaware that they'd just witnessed the birth of a viral moment. The clip hit social media within minutes. Millions watched it in slow motion, analyzing every frame like it was evidence in a trial. Was it comfort? Was it strategy? Or was it something far more intimate? Something whispered between two people who shared more history than anyone realized. The internet had its theories. Some claimed he said, "You're stronger than you know." Others swore he whispered, "We'll finish what Charlie started." But the most viral caption of all came from a fan who simply wrote, "It wasn't a whisper, it was a handoff." And that's when everything changed. The internet stopped talking about Charlie Kirk's death and started talking about Erica's relationship with Trump. Every look between them was dissected, every handshake replayed, every public appearance reinterpreted. In one 17-second clip, grief turned into gossip and condolence became conspiracy. Even Joe Rogan couldn't resist commenting on it. "That whisper, man, it's weird," he said during a later podcast. "There's something about it that just doesn't feel like a normal eulogy moment." You can feel the tension in that clip. It wasn't just what Trump said, it was how familiar it looked. The body language, the hand placement, the subtle nod, the way Erica didn't step back. It wasn't staged, it was too natural to be staged, and that's what made it even more suspicious. Soon, every major gossip page and political podcast ran the same headline: "The whisper that shook the movement." In that instant, the widow became a symbol, not of loss, but of legacy. And whether she wanted it or not, Erica Kirk had officially stepped out of her husband's shadow and into the spotlight. But if the whisper was the spark, what came next, her words, was the explosion. Because the speech that followed didn't sound like mourning, it sounded like a campaign. The speech that sounded like a campaign. The lights dimmed just slightly, enough to cast a golden halo around Erica Kirk as she stepped onto the stage. The applause was polite at first, hesitant even. After all, this was supposed to be a eulogy. But as she adjusted the microphone and looked up, what came out of her mouth didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like strategy. Her voice, steady, unwavering, cut through the hush. "You have no idea the fire that burns inside this widow," she began, her tone shifting from trembling emotion to fiery conviction. "The cries of this widow will echo around the world." It wasn't a farewell, it was a declaration. The crowd, once somber, suddenly came alive. Phones lifted, cameras rolled, every news outlet caught the same thing: the transformation. The woman they'd just seen in tears now spoke like a leader taking taking command. The cadence of her words, sharp, deliberate, rehearsed, felt less like grief and more like a rallying cry. Her message was wrapped in faith and resilience, but underneath it was something unmistakable: ambition. She wasn't just honoring her husband's legacy, she was claiming it, and the timing couldn't have been more cinematic. The lights, the silence, the placement of every camera, it all looked choreographed. Political commentators caught it immediately. That wasn't a eulogy, one wrote. That was a launch speech. Even Joe Rogan, who'd been skeptical from the start, couldn't help but notice. It's weird, he said on his next episode. You can almost feel the shift from mourning to momentum, like she was ready for this moment. The internet predictably went wild. Some called it empowering, a woman rising from tragedy to carry on her husband's mission. Others called it performance art. Grief doesn't sound that composed. One comment read, "That wasn't pain, that was branding." And then came the detail that sent shockwaves through every corner of social media: Donald Trump's reaction. He stood, clapping slowly, then mouthed the words, "That's leadership." In that instant, the speculation ignited again. Was this the passing of the torch, or the beginning of a new alliance? Because as Erica raised her hand, not to wave, but to point upward, the crowd roared. It wasn't mourning anymore. It was momentum. That one speech flipped the narrative completely. She was no longer the grieving widow. She was Erica Kirk, the symbol, the successor, the headline. And behind every standing ovation, there was a whisper, not of sympathy, but of suspicion. But while the crowd cheered and cameras flashed, one man stayed quiet: Joe Rogan, because what he said next, off air, would change how people saw the entire movement. The Rogan ripple. When Joe Rogan speaks, people listen, but when he doesn't, the world goes feral. After Erica's viral speech and Trump's slow motion applause, fans waited for Rogan's follow-up take, expecting him to dissect every frame on his next episode. But when he sat down behind the mic, he didn't say a word about it. No clips, no commentary, no jokes, just silence. And that silence hit harder than a headline, because Joe Rogan's silence isn't absence, it's ammunition. His followers know his rhythm. When he sidesteps a topic, it's usually because he's seen something deeper, something he's not ready to say yet. Clips from his previous podcast, the one where he first hinted that this story doesn't make sense, started circulating again. But this time, people looked for meaning in the pauses, the way he leaned back, the shift in his tone, the smirk right before the subject changed. Reddit threads titled "What Joe Didn't Say" filled with timestamps, facial expression breakdowns, and full-blown psychoanalysis. One user wrote, "He knows more, you can see it in his eyes." Another posted, "Joe's trying not to say something that'll get him shut down." And that was it. The Rogan ripple had begun. Soon, other podcasters picked it up. Clips from Rogan's older interviews about political corruption, media manipulation, and controlled narratives resurfaced, repackaged to fit this new scandal. On TikTok, creators paired his quote, "When something feels too clean, it's usually hiding something dirty," with slow motion footage of Erica standing beside Trump, creating a viral montage that blurred truth, speculation, and storytelling into one cinematic illusion. The beauty, or the danger, of Rogan's influence is that he doesn't need to say the words cover up or affair. He just has to raise an eyebrow, and the internet writes the script for him. And once his followers started connecting the dots, the theory went from niche curiosity to mainstream obsession. YouTube thumbnails screamed, "Joe Rogan knows something," his face side by side with Erica's and Trump's. Reaction videos hit millions of views. News anchors debated whether Rogan's strategic silence was a form of commentary itself. It wasn't just about Erica anymore, it was about the machine. People started questioning Turning Point USA, Trump's motives, even the conservative media that stayed quiet. The Rogan effect had mutated into the Rogan ripple, a chain reaction where one man's doubt shook an entire movement's confidence. And while others chased headlines, Rogan leaned back in his chair mid-episode and finally broke the silence. Not with facts, but with a warning. "I'm not saying anything," he said, "because sometimes the truth doesn't need help, it just needs time." That single line became gospel. People quoted it like prophecy. And once again, the mystery grew. Not because Rogan fueled it, but because he refused to stop it. But the internet wasn't done. Because if Rogan's silence created chaos, the public's response made it unstoppable. The conversation had gone nuclear. And what came next would turn rumor into revelation. The Inticia Internet investigation. When Joe Rogan's silence set the internet ablaze, online detectives took over. Within hours, Reddit threads like the Erica timeline became became digital evidence rooms, dissecting every photo, outfit, and gesture of Charlie Kirk's widow. What began as curiosity turned obsessive. TikTok edits slowed her every blink. YouTube breakdowns analyzed her body language with Trump, and X, formerly Twitter, split between those calling it mentorship and those hinting at manipulation. Then came the AI sleuths, overlaying Trump's old pageant footage with Erica's memorial appearances, fueling theories of a hidden past connection. Major outlets joined the frenzy, headlines asking whether grief had crossed into strategy. When Turning Point USA disabled her comments to protect privacy, it only deepened suspicion. Podcasters and influencers built entire timelines, linking her rise to Rogan's cryptic quote, "Power doesn't disappear, it relocates." The result? A cultural obsession disguised as an investigation. Facts blurred into feelings, screenshots became evidence, and the truth no longer mattered. Belief did. Erica's silence didn't end the speculation, it made her story eternal, a digital ghost that refuses to fade. But as the internet unraveled her life frame by frame, Erica did something no one expected. Nothing. And that silence, it didn't end the story, it made it immortal. The line between grief and power, what began as tragedy, slowly evolved into theater. Charlie Kirk's death was supposed to be about loss. A man shot, a widow mourning, a movement in shock. But as the weeks passed, Erica Kirk's grief started to look less like sorrow and more like strategy. Her calm became charisma. Her eulogy sounded less like tributes and more like campaign speeches. And somewhere between the tears and the headlines, mourning turned into momentum. The internet watched that transformation in real time, half calling it strength, half calling it a PR move. When Erica took over Turning Point USA and declared, "The cries of this widow will echo around the world," it was clear she wasn't just honoring Charlie, she was inheriting him. That's when the line between grief and power vanished. Joe Rogan once said, "When tragedy hits the powerful, someone always cashes in. The only question is who." And now that prophecy had a face. Whether intentional or not, Erica became both symbol and survivor. Her silence, her armor. Her image, her currency. To her followers, she was resilience incarnate. To her critics, she was the ultimate strategist. A woman who turned heartbreak into influence. The story wasn't about death anymore. It was about what came after. A love story repurposed into a power shift. And in a world where empathy can be staged and silence can scream louder than truth, Erica's greatest weapon wasn't her grief. It was how she used it. Because in the end, maybe the real mystery isn't who pulled the trigger, it's who turned pain into power. And if you think this story's over, think again. The internet never forgets, and neither do we. So hit subscribe, stay tuned, and let's see how deep this rabbit hole really goes.